I had the opportunity to speak with Vic Vela of Colorado Public Radio about his experience with addiction and his experience as an HIV survivor in the wake of World AIDS Day, which was on December 1st. It was a great interview, great opportunity to hear about somebody's experience and broaden my own horizons as I learn going through the world. The context of it, World AIDS Day is tomorrow. Your experience with HIV is something that I think is really, really important, especially with all the misconceptions. You sent me that article yesterday. I think it's really important to tell your story and delve into what it means to have HIV and what people should know about it, whether they are somebody with the disease or if they're somebody that's learning about it for the first time or getting a refresher. I just think the context is huge.
Yeah, and I think there's still a lot of stigma out there in terms of what people think it is. A lot of your audience on campus will be younger folks who did not grow up with the AIDS crisis. I grew up with the AIDS crisis, so I'm old enough to remember the '80s. And I remember being a kid in the 80s, and I would see all these stories on the nightly news of people getting sick, usually gay men. They didn't know what to call it at first. There were it was known as sort of a gay cancer, is what they called it at first, until they figured it out and ultimately came up with the name HIV and AIDS. At that time, I think it's important for everyone to know that people did not live long back then when they got the virus. It was a killer. There weren't too many people who survived it who were part of the 80s and 90s. It was devastating. It was devastating to the gay community especially. I caught the tail end of it when I was in college, and so I had a lot of friends, older friends, who I would hang out with at gay bars. And like in the 90s, I would see some old timer at a bar and we would have some drinks, and then I'd come back a few months later and I found out he died. And that was pretty common for me to deal with and for a lot of us to deal with when someone got it. And then over the years, the science has advanced tremendously. We know a lot more about the virus, and now it's to the point where when you take care of yourself, if you take your medication every day, like I do, it's sort of a manageable chronic illness, much like people who need to take medication for diabetes or something. But you can live with it, and that's the difference now. I've been positive. I tested positive in 2006, so it's been a long time now, and it's not a death sentence like it used to be.
What would you say has been the advancement in, whether it be medical technology, something that has really changed your perspective on how to deal with the disease since you were first diagnosed in 2006?
I got lucky because when I was diagnosed, there was the antiretroviral therapy had come a long way. It used to be where you had to take a bunch of different kinds of medications, different cocktails. I mean, you would have a medicine cabinet full of pills just to get you through the day, and the side effects were horrible. But when I was diagnosed, I was able to take antiretroviral therapy that was a 3-in-1 medication, and I would just take it once a day. And and that beats the heck out of some of the other things that a lot of my predecessors had to do while scientists were still figuring out drug cocktails, because you would hear from people that the side effects from the medication were worse than the actual virus. And luckily, yes, I had, especially from the outset, because that's a triple whopper combination of medication that I had to take. It was hard initially, but there's been advancements. I'm now on my third different kind of therapy. They're all similar, but they get better as each as each year goes by. It gets better, and the medication is easier to deal with.
Give me the time frame of, how the kind of timeline of how everything happened to you, and how you started learning, how you felt about it as it happened.
Well, with me, it was I was very sick. I was very, very sick in the summer of 2006. I couldn't figure out why. I was the only person in town who had like the flu in the middle of the summer. And I would get these bizarre skin kind of things going on with rashes or whatever, and it was just not normal. So doctors would run a bunch of tests, and they, to rule things out, and everything came back negative on regular, normal things that humans get. And they were sort of perplexed as to what was going on until one day my doctor, who knew about my past, I'm very open about the fact that I did heavy drugs for a really, really long time. He said, "When's the last time you got tested for HIV?" And as soon as he asked the question, I knew that's what was going on. Like, I just knew. Like, I had been irresponsible for so many years that's exactly what that was my answer. I knew that's what it was. And then sure enough, he ran a test, and the results came back positive. This was September of 2006. I don't know how long. Now, that's when I got diagnosed. I don't know how long I actually had the virus. It's impossible to tell. It's also impossible to tell how I got it because, again, I was not a saint. It could have been from a partner from a couple years prior. It could have been from IV drug use, who knows? But the point is that I was in pretty bad shape when I was diagnosed, so that that led my doctor to believe that I had it for a while. When they test your blood for HIV, once you're positive, then they go back and look at other blood work to determine kind of where you are, where your numbers are. And two things that they look at are the viral load, which measures the presence of the virus in your bloodstream, and the your T cell count or CD4 count, that's your immune system. Those are your helper cells that help you fight off things. When I was diagnosed, my viral load was through the roof, and my CD4 count was very, very low. And so it was in the range of what we would call, what many measurements would call borderline AIDS. And there's certain measurements that they use. So yeah, I was in bad shape. I was in bad shape. I was very sick. And so because of that, shortly after that, I started on therapy and medication assisted treatment. And since then, I'm still here.
So when you got that first diagnosis, and beforehand you kind of knew, once they started mentioning what was going on, they just kind of knew that was really what it was. Yeah. What was that first initial reaction like for you? Was it, your heart stopped? Was it, who do I call? Do I talk to my family? Yeah. What was that?
It was devastating. I was there alone with my doctor when I got the news. It's hard for me to really put into words how I felt, because at that time in my life, I was a much different person than I am now. Right now, as I talk to you, I'm sober. I've been in recovery since 2015. I take care of myself. I care about what happens to me. I care about my future. Back then, when I got diagnosed, I didn't care about any of those things. I was knee deep in a heavy drug addiction with cocaine, powder, and then crack and meth. So I didn't really. When I got the news, it sucked, but what I did was what I always did when I got bad news, and that's I just fell into heavy drug use and drinking. So that's how I self-medicated the news. But definitely the drug use got worse when I got diagnosed. That's for sure, because I didn't want to deal with reality.
So coping is one of the very difficult things when it comes to whether it be mental or physical, medical, whichever situation you're dealing with. Coping can be one of those difficult things. You went into more of a spell of drug use and unhealthy
Yeah, because I
habits.
didn't have. If something like that happened to me now, it's a different story, because I know what coping is. I know how to cope. It's never easy to get that news, no matter how positive you are. But at the time, I didn't have those coping mechanisms because, I drank and did drugs every day. That was my coping mechanism. So, but I think the takeaway, if there is a good takeaway for people to knowing what I know now, that you don't have to look at it like it's a death sentence. Like you never want to have HIV. It sucks, and it still kills a lot of people, and it has a huge impact on your immune system, obviously, but with the right mindset, with love in your heart and with a positive attitude, and you go into it thinking, okay, I got this now I got to deal with it. You can turn your life around. You can come out of it, and you can live a normal, almost as normal of a life as anyone else. Not everyone else has to deal with daily drug medication use, and getting lab tests done all the time, but it's manageable. And so what I always tell people whenever they tell me that they've been diagnosed is, there are ways that you can cope with this. There are ways and there's help for you, and there are resources for you. It's not the end of your life.
So it's a disease that's very, very prevalent in men, particularly gay men. That was part of the crisis back in the day. So Colorado, the Denver metro area, is currently, of the people that have been diagnosed in 2017, 88.3% were male. What would be your advice to men out there to protect themselves from either spreading the disease if they have it, or by keeping themselves from, getting infected?
Yeah, I just think that what I always tell people is I owe it to people who didn't have a choice to be responsible. Now that I'm healthy in a lot of senses, healthy in a physical sense and a spiritual sense, now that I'm in recovery, I owe it to people who died, who didn't have the science available at the time to take my medication every day, to be responsible, to be an advocate, to fully disclose my status to any potential partner. And I guess those are the things I would say that to other people as well. Like, I don't lecture people. I don't do that. I don't wag my finger at people because I've been there. But I'm just here to say that it's still serious business, and if you don't take care of it, you're going to suffer a lot, and you can cause suffering for other people as well. And I think we all owe it to as a society to be educated on this stuff.
So MSU Denver is one of the, I'd say probably one of the most diverse campuses in Colorado, really within the country. Disease, it's not biased based on race. It's not biased based on ethnicity.
Yeah.
Anybody can get it of either gender. It's one of the things that's really, really important to put out there that, you don't have to be a white gay man to get this disease. What has been your experience with seeing the infection go outside of that, stereotypical range of people?
Well, I think that was a stereotype. Well, look, I mean, when HIV first took off in the 80s, yeah, it did overwhelmingly impact gay men. I mean, there is evidence to that. But as we know more about the disease, and as it's taken off across the world, it doesn't matter. There's people in different parts of the world who suffer just as much as they do here. So it's not. I think that's also something that's important for people to understand, that I would always say about my own drug addiction that drug addiction doesn't care if you're Republican or Democrat or gay or straight or black or white. It'll take you down. And the same with this virus. It does not care who you are or what your status is in life, whether you're rich or poor. If you don't take care of yourself, it's going to bring you down. But it doesn't have to be like that.
So there were 318 new diagnoses in Denver, the Denver metro area in 2017. We kind of went over that. About 90% of it was male. The total number in 2017 was 10,180 people. It looks like this disease is not being spread as much as it once was. What would you attribute that to?
Well, before I answer that, I am not a doctor, and I am not someone who works for the state health department. So I think some of those questions are better served for those folks. But as someone who lives with it, it is probably awareness. It is probably, we're in a different time. I think there was a time when I was growing up, it wasn't that long ago, when I was in college, and the only place where gay men felt comfortable being themselves was at gay bars or gay bathhouses or whatever. Society has come a long way since then, and I think because of that, you go to any bar in Denver, it's kind of come as you are, pretty much. So you don't have to go to a gay bar to be accepted. And I think that's played out in terms of how men have sex as well, in that you don't have to go underground to do it, like I did in college, and like how older people did, without worrying of getting beaten up. That does still exist. Don't get me wrong, but it's gotten so much better. So I think because society's acceptance of gay people has gotten so much better, that behaviors have also gotten better.
An interesting point there. So as you were developing, you said, initially you kind of had this rough transition, rough coping. Was there somebody that you looked up to, whether it be a celebrity, a friend, somebody with HIV or AIDS, that you kind of looked up to and saw as an idol or a role model?
That's a really good question. I never really thought of that before. When the first person who I knew who was positive was an ex-boyfriend of mine. I do know that I did not get it from him, because several years had passed since I found about him and my own diagnosis. But yeah, I guess it was summer of '98 is when he disclosed that he was HIV positive, and that was devastating. That was I knew friends at bars who got sick, but he was the person who was closest to me, and that was really hard to deal with, because I was still young, and I myself had misconceptions around what HIV was. I did look up to, not so much. Elton John doesn't have HIV, but the work that he's done worldwide to spread awareness, I really looked up to him when I got my diagnosis. So I've been told myself, it's pretty it's pretty touching when people reach out to me on Twitter and tell me thank you for being open about your status, because it's helped me deal with what I'm going through. And so I think, as you know, there are role models, and nowadays there's so many people living with HIV, and there's so many people who are open about it, that the stigma, they're trying to, the reason why they're open about it, and including yours truly, is because we're just trying to chip away at that stigma of it. It is okay. Look at me. You know me. I talk to you on the radio every day. You welcome me in your homes, in your cars. By the way, I'm HIV positive. The more we can just say that I'm just a human being who has this, and let me tell you about it, the more we can let people know that, ask me questions. Like, you'd be amazed how many people, even with me, think it's taboo or something to bring it up. Like, I've had friends say, I want to ask you about HIV, but I kind of feel bad doing it. No, this is why I'm open about it, because let me educate you. Let me tell you that this is not what it used to be. Let me tell you what it really is. So I think that's a big deal, and that's a big reason why I'm open about my status.
The LGBTQ plus Student Resource Center on campus for MSU Denver, they field a bunch of different people across all three universities on campus. What is the responsibility of an office like that? What have you noticed from, whether it be LGBTQ plus centers across the state, whether it's the Center on Colfax or otherwise, that is so important with creating awareness, and what's their role?
Yeah, I think anytime you have a group of people coming together with a common purpose and who have commonalities in terms of what they have experienced in life, it's going to build power. And I think that historically LGBTQ groups came together because, it was this us against them mentality. It's how ACT UP, if you know your history there, became such a pivotal part of the LGBTQ movement during the AIDS crisis. It was ACT UP who would protest and get politicians' attention, and let's get these drug trials out to people so that way we can try and save lives. That's what can happen when people come together and take care of one another. And by taking care of the group, then you're taking care of a community as a whole. And so I'm thrilled to see that we still see on campus an LGBTQ presence where people can just talk about the shit that they're going through, because even though society has embraced so many, of my brothers and sisters, there's still a long way to go in terms of acceptance and in terms of just being, a part of the community. So, when they can get together and talk about that stuff, through those conversations, then they can educate people who aren't part of that group, who don't know what it's like to go through what they go through. And I just think it's beautiful.
Awesome. I appreciate you sitting down with me today. I'm Brady Piper of Met Media, Piper Podcasts, Piper Productions, with Vic Vela of Colorado Public Radio. Thanks again. Anything you'd like to say?
No, thank you, Brady. Thank you so much for doing a story on World AIDS Day, because it's, there's a reason why they have it. I may be doing okay, and other people listening might be doing okay, but there's a lot of people who still suffer with this virus, and there's a lot of people who don't, even in this country, areas that don't have the resources to lift themselves up or to get the help that they need. So as long as I'm still alive, I'm going to remind people that HIV still, even though it's a manageable disease, it can still kill you dead. And that's the thing that we really need to remind people whenever we lose sight of it in when we talk about things that are afflicting others in this world.
I appreciated the chance to speak with Vic Vela today. It was a real incredible opportunity, and I had a great time looking at the CPR station where this was recorded and understanding what really goes into radio broadcasts and the personalities that are involved. Please go ahead and give this a like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the bell notification if you like what you're seeing, because I do a bunch of stuff, really all journalism related, sometimes podcasts, sometimes interviews, sometimes television packages, and then, well, we'll see what's next. But go ahead and like, comment, subscribe. I'll see you guys later.